Back to news and views. Talk 96.3 and 103.7.
Welcome back in. Lawmakers returned to Raleigh this week for the start of the short session, which began with non-voting sessions, should pick up momentum after Memorial Day. John Bell is the North Carolina House Majority Leader. He represents the North Carolina House District 10, representing parts of Greene, Johnson, and Wayne County. John, welcome back to News and Views.
Hey, it's nice to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Hey, before we get into the short session, any surprises in Tuesday's primary as it relates to the members of the North Carolina House?
We had a couple surprises. We had a long-term member in the Randolph County area who was seeking re-election, got beat by a challenger, and so that was a surprise for us. And then, of course, with the redistricting, we had two double bunkings where we had two sitting members that were lumped into the same district, and of course, you're going to lose two of those members,
right.
And that was unfortunate. But when you have areas that have population loss, and we have to shift districts around by our state constitution every 10 years, unfortunately, those are the type of things that happen. Had some interesting races across the state. On the other side of the aisle, had a race in Guilford County where a hand-picked opponent was recruited by the Democrat Party, and he was very aggressive towards our member, and he forgot to campaign. And the other lady, who was a challenger, she didn't campaign at all, and somehow she took 70+% of the vote.
How about that? Wow.
So elections are always interesting. This is the time to where we go back in and look at the different elections across the state and what moved the needle, what made one person more likable than the other person, and how those races are played out. So we take time to learn from all those races across the state.
Well, on the federal level, everyone is talking about, and I think they're right, that we're going to see pretty good increases on the federal level in the House, in Congress, and probably in the U.S. Senate as well. Do you think that's going to carry over to the North Carolina House and the North Carolina Senate?
I do. I want to take you back in history a little bit. If you look over the last, let's say the last 20 years here in North Carolina, the best Republicans have performed on a generic ballot. And what I mean by generic ballot is if you take all the names off the ballot and just look at Republican, Democrat, the Republicans, the best we've performed has been a R4, which means the Republican has a 4-point advantage walking into the door.
Right.
We're seeing polling now that shows us at an R7 to an R11 on that generic ballot.
Wow.
And so we don't know what that looks like. President Biden and his administration and the dysfunction in Washington has really got people upset about the direction of our country. When you can't find baby formula on the shelf, when gas is hitting $5 a gallon, when you go to the store and get what's there, not what you have to settle for what's there, not what you need. As Americans, we're not used to this, and we do not like it. And so that national drive, the policies that are at the national level are going to trickle down, and it's playing into our favor politically going into the November election.
Sounds good to me. Hey, let's talk about the short session. Now, correct me, but I believe that the main purpose of the short session is to modify the budget. Is that a correct assessment? And beyond that, is there anything else on the agenda that needs to be taken care of?
You're correct. We have a biennium budget, and so last year you saw us put together a spending plan for the next 2 years, and we come back in the short session, which I hope this year is short. After coming off the longest long session in state history, we all hope it's short. But it's to make tweaks to the spending plan. We have we're very blessed to have another surplus again this year, and unfortunately we're dealing with inflation. So a lot of the projects that we have funded in the long session budget, we're going to have to add additional funding to that to make up for the increase on construction costs and labor costs and inflation that's happening across our state. So that's going to be the main focus of the short session. There will be other bills that pop up. We have a bill that you're going to see run next week. It deals with the hemp industry. We had a hemp pilot program that expired January the 1st, 2020, and then 6 months after that, any carve-outs, any special carve-outs will expire on July 1st. And so if we don't act, all your CBD products, all your hemp products here in the state of North Carolina will actually be illegal. And so we don't want to we don't want to see that happen because we have a growing industry there. So we'll codify state and federal law. That should be a pretty easy fix, and then we'll start the process of. You'll see a lot of local bills come through. Hopefully there'll be no major legislation because the goal will be to get out pretty quick.
We're talking to John Bell, North Carolina's House Majority Leader. You talked about the surplus. It was some $6.2 billion. Is that a record high for the surplus?
It's not a record high. We've been very blessed to have a surplus as we moved along. The tax reforms that we've put in place for the last 10 years are working, and so we want to continue driving that personal income tax down. That corporate tax is going to be at zero. We've built in trigger mechanisms, so we do this in a very strategic way, so we don't overspend or put ourselves in a bind for future budgets. But we've been very blessed that our tax reform is working, and we hope it continues to work. And it should. North Carolina's a growing state. We've got very low taxes, and it just goes back to the old saying that if you tax people less, they have more money in their pocket, they'll spend more money.
Isn't it interesting how lowering taxes has increased the surplus, totally opposite of what the Democrats told us?
Absolutely, and also not just increasing the surplus, but along with that, we were able to have regulatory reforms here in our state. When Tom Tillis was Speaker of the House, he actually implemented the first regulatory reform committee, and I believe every session since then, with the exception of one, we've had a regulatory reform bill which has reduced regulatory burdens, some really over-the-top regulatory burdens for business and industry and families across the state. And so we've done the regulatory reform, the tax reform, and the result of that is we have a booming economy here in North Carolina. You've got business announcements every day. We have major manufacturers, major jobs, announcements all throughout our state, and people want to be here. So we're one of the fastest growing states in the country and one of the best places to do business in the country.
I saw the letter, the Carolina Journal was reporting on the letter that Grover Norquist, who's president of the American Tax Reform Organization, sent to the legislature, commending, giving you all kudos on the job you're doing. But one of the things that he mentioned out of that $6.2 billion is, hey, why don't you speed up the tax decreases that you have scheduled? I think by 2027, the income tax rate for individuals would hit 3.99. He's saying, why don't you speed that up, get it here a little quicker than 2027? Is that on the table? Are you considering that?
That's going to be part of the discussion. We've taken a strategic approach to tax reform. And so the issue we're running into now is, one, even though we have a surplus, we have to account for the recurring dollars. And what I mean by that is that once you do investments in and with state employee raises, et cetera, you have to account for that for the life of that employee. So we want to make sure that we're being very responsible on our recurring expenses, which will add to the budget from there on out. Also, we're dealing with inflation, and so a lot of our surplus is actually going to go to these projects that, you look at the Brody School of Medicine there in Greenville. That was a $200 million project, and construction costs have increased by 25% on that project alone. Yeah. So we want to be able to keep our commitment to those type of projects, and so we want to be sure that we're spending appropriately.
Let me ask you, everyone's talking about the Supreme Court leaking that opinion from Alito concerning the Roe v. Wade decision, and it looks like there's a really good possibility that Roe v. Wade could be overturned. Will you all be considering any kind of legislation? My understanding is if it is overturned, we will go back to what was on the books in 1973 when Roe v. Wade became law. Are you all considering any kind of new legislation?
So, unfortunately, any type of pro-life legislation that we put forward, and frankly, any pro-life legislation that we have put forward has been vetoed by Governor Cooper. He is not going to support any of that. We do not have the votes in the House nor the Senate to override a veto at this time. because we would have to have 3 Democrats in the House and 2 Democrats in the Senate to join us on an override. And so that makes it a challenge to get something done. But that is why these elections coming up are extremely important. We want to be sure that we get the supermajority in place in the House and the Senate. That way we can push forward on a pro-life conservative agenda and make sure it becomes law here in the state of North Carolina.
And the way you said that, it sounds like you feel like there is a real possibility that the Republicans could get a supermajority.
We do. When you look at the polling that we're seeing across not just our state but across the nation, and the polling that the president has overall, how low he's polling in favorability, that gives us an opportunity to go after seats that we probably wouldn't have been able to go after before. And we've recruited some outstanding candidates across the state. We've got people that have chosen to say, "Hey, look, I'm gonna put my business and my career and my family on hold right now. It's an opportunity to serve my community." And they have really stepped up. And so we've got outstanding candidates running. We feel confident that we will get right close to the supermajority or over the supermajority. And we think November is going to be an outstanding time for conservatives across the state.
Again, we're talking to John Bell, North Carolina's House Majority Leader. Another issue, and this is one that has bipartisan support. In fact, it might have more support on the Democratic side than it has on the Republican side, and that's sports wagering. Are you going to deal with that this short session?
I'll leave as soon as I hang up with you. I leave for a meeting to go talk about that very subject. It is a subject that has been brought up. The bill passed the Senate. It has passed the committee in the House, and so we will be taking up that bill as we move along in session. And so we're not at the point to where we're counting votes yet, but it is there's some favorability for it. There's some opposition against it, and there's folks in the middle that are learning more about it. So that's an issue that you'll see play out here in the short session. So
the short session you think will be over, and I know things are in flux because obviously the long session was really long, and you probably feel like long. You just got out of the long session. How long do you think the short session is going to go?
Well, I feel like we never left, but the great thing. Unfortunately, it was a very long session, but the great thing is we came out with a strong bipartisan budget that was really good for the citizens of this state. And so I'm very proud of that. And it's our hope that by 4th of July, we'll be out of Raleigh and back home in our districts and serving our communities.
Sounds good. John, thanks for all you do. Thanks for checking in with us. Let's stay in touch, especially as the short session comes to some decision-making. Keep us informed. Do appreciate it.
Absolutely, and thank you. And we're always willing to talk and let your listeners know what's going on in Raleigh.
Sounds great. John Bell, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Stay with us. I'll be right back.